I'll take a look at the arguments for and against music's adaptivity. Did music help us survive? Why does it exist? As it happens, there's no scientific consensus on this matter. Some scientists think that music doesn't do anything to help us survive, and others think that it does. Now, in case you're uncertain about that word adaptive, here's the definition. Something is adaptive if it helps an organism survive in its environment. For example, a physical trait, a mental capacity, or behavior that makes an organism better to eat, shelter, defend itself, and mate, then that trait, capacity, or behavior is said to be adaptive. Okay, so here's some examples of adaptivity to make the point clear. The difference in beak shape and size between subspecies of the bird named the finch. So these birds are all called a finch, but they have different beak shapes. Those beak shapes differ depending on what island they're found on. So Darwin, when he was on the voyage of the Beagle, 1839, visited the Galapagos Islands, and he discovered that the birds, the finches on the various islands, had different beak shapes that reflected their different diets. Some had big beaks so as to crack nuts. Some had sharp, pointy beaks so as to poke through bark to get insects. And it's pretty easy to see that depending on your beak shape, if you're on an island that's filled with nuts and you have one of those beaks shaped like an insect stabber, then you're not going to be able to crack the nuts and you're not going to survive. That's adaptivity. So your beak shape is adapted to what it takes to survive. Another example of adaptivity is during the Industrial Revolution, like 1760 to 1820, the moths in England actually changed from a white coloration to a black coloration. There was so much soot and dirt all around from all the factory smoke that the moths actually evolved and changed to a black coloration so as to better hide from predators. The black coloration was adaptive. Is music adaptive? That's the question. So let's take a look at the music is not adaptive hypothesis first. Harvard psychologist Steven Pinker believes that music is just pleasure technology. You're curious. This is Steven Pinker here. This is Steven Pinker, Harvard psychologist. And in 1997, he wrote this book called How the Mind Works. And it's got this awesome section on music, wherein he thoroughly explores the adaptivity of music. And I'm going to summarize some of his points here. So here's his thesis. He says that music is auditory cheesecake, an exquisite confection crafted to tickle the sensitive spots of at least 6 of our mental faculties. We enjoy strawberry cheesecake, but not because we evolved a taste for it. We evolved circuits that give us trickles of enjoyment from the sweet tastes of ripe fruit, or the creamy mouthfeels of fat and oils from nuts and meat, and the coolness of fresh water. Cheesecake packs a sensual wallop unlike anything in the natural world. It's a mega dose of agreeable stimuli that we concocted for the express purpose of pressing our pleasure buttons. So he suggests that music is a pleasure technology like pornography or literature and art that exploit our propensity to have sex, use our imagination, and seek patterns. But they don't necessarily enhance our ability to mate, shelter, eat, or survive. So it's just piggybacking off of these mental faculties. We want to seek patterns. We have acute hearing. Music seems to piggyback off of these abilities. he concludes that music shows no design towards attaining a long life, leaving many grandchildren, or helping us accurately perceive the world in any way. And his reasoning is that music is an evolutionary byproduct, an adaptive mechanism that evolved for other reasons like language, auditory scene analysis, emotional calls, habitat selection, motor control. So, language is necessary for survival. Auditory scene analysis is necessary for survival. Emotional calls, habitat selection. These are the things that confer survival ability. And then music is piggybacking off of those abilities. That's his thesis. All right, so here's a picture of looks like an Australopithecus escaping from a lion or a tiger. I'm not sure which. And this creature was able to escape, likely because he or she heard the animal and was able to analyze the scene and knew that it was time to run for his or her life. So having acute hearing and being able to analyze scenes for danger, those are clearly adaptive. So having good hearing, yes, that helps you survive. And recognizing patterns, that helps you survive. So scientists like Pinker believe that music co-opts these abilities, acute hearing and pattern recognition, for the purposes of pleasure, like a cheesecake. Like we like to find nuts and sweet fruit, but a cheesecake is something like nothing that we would find in nature. Music is like this. He asserts, Steven Pinker, that humans could do without music and undergo no significant loss in our capacity to function. Quote, compared with language, vision, social reasoning, and physical know-how, music could vanish from our species, and the rest of our lifestyle would be virtually unchanged. Music appears to be pure pleasure technology. Pinker suggests that literature and other arts work the same way as alcohol, drugs, and rich desserts. He explains that music piggybacks on the following biologically adaptive features. So the following are adaptive. They evolved because they helped us survive and find mates. Language. Music exploits our ability to make sense of long strings of syllables, long strings of noises. I'm just uttering noises out of my head. And if I'm doing a good job, you're understanding what I'm saying. That's language. Music is the same way, long strings of notes, melodies. Auditory scene analysis. We can discern important details for survival about our environment. Therefore, we can listen for and discern important details about music. We can tell chord progressions and melodies and instruments and timbres and styles. We can analyze the scene due to auditory scene analysis, this ability that helps us survive. Right? Like this Australopithecus was able to analyze the scene that there is a wild and dangerous animal nearby, and it's best to run for your life. Emotional calls. Music often features sounds akin to whimpers and shrieks and growls, shouts, cheers, which are all sounds that perturb our emotions. Blues, jazz, rock often features whimpers and shrieks and growls, cheers. Habitat selection. Visual features signal important information about habitat safety and fertility. So music exploits this ability by providing rhythmic and melodic features that are akin to order and serenity in one's environment. We like ordered and serene music. Classical music and contemporary pop music is ordered, it's predictable, it's rhythmic, you can dance to it. Habitat selection is the same way. We prefer an ordered and serene environment for safety. Motor control. Rhythm is a universal musical component, and repetitive actions like dancing are akin to other emotional and motivational components like working, right? You're doing a rhythmic motion, or pushing a baby in a swing, or sex, motor control. And then he admits that he doesn't know. Maybe it's something else, that the scientists are speculating that the research is far from conclusive here, and music's existence might be explained differently. So he summarizes his view about music by stating that he does not believe everything the mind does is biologically adaptive. It makes sense. He puts the matter poetically by suggesting that the mind does some things that are akin to Sunday afternoon projects of dubious adaptive value. According to him, art, music, and literature are Sunday afternoon projects of dubious adaptive value, just piggybacking off of these other survival mechanisms. That's the music is not adaptive hypothesis. Okay, now let's take a look at the music is adaptive hypothesis. So I read this book by Daniel J. Levitin, The World in 6 Songs, and he is all about music being crucial for our survival and our evolution. So let's take a look at his music is adaptive hypothesis. Okay, so some scientists disagree with Pinker, and Levitin is one of them. So from McGill University, Daniel J. Levitin, this guy here, they're both about the same age, both doctors. Music is not simply a distraction or pastime, but a core element of our identity as a species, an activity that paved the way for more complex behaviors, such as language, large-scale cooperative undertakings, and passing down of important information from one generation to the next. So Levitin argues that music served our ancestors by advertising cognitive, emotional, and physical health to prospective mates. That seems to be his main thesis, that our fitness was advertised to mates in part by our ability to perform and sing music. So if you could play an instrument or you can sing a song, that was evolutionarily advantageous. And then he summarizes his hypothesis by suggesting that there are 6 song types that were critical to the evolution of language, thought, and culture. So Levitin suggests that music came before language, and that there were 6 specific types of songs. Friendship songs, songs that bind a marginalized group. There were songs of joy, songs to provide neurochemical and therapeutic effects. Songs of comfort, songs that act as drugs for sadness. And songs that are religious, they create order in a religious ritual. Songs that are useful for stimulating memory and passing down knowledge, like the alphabet song, for example. And then, of course, love songs, songs that define social structures and bring everyone together. Okay, so he goes through each one of these songs in The World in 6 Songs, these song types, and shows how they're evolutionarily advantageous. Let's take a look at one, just the friendship song. He suggests that friendship songs enable social bonding that's necessary for human culture and society to evolve. He says songs like Smoking in the Boys' Room binds disenfranchised youth together in defiance. So there's evidence that friendship songs like this played an important function throughout human history. He says that they are a category of dance song, which involve synchronized movements of individuals within a group. Think hanging out with your buddies as a teenager, all packed into an automobile, just cranking your favorite music, right? Just driving around the neighborhood showing off, right? Friendship songs, binding the group, Smoking in the Boys' Room. So this is a form of war song, he suggests, and both for the offensive attack and defensive vigils. He concludes that to promote social bonding through collective movement, these friendship songs were critical to survival throughout human history. You can think about singing a song on your way into battle, or singing a song to stay up all night to make sure that no one attacks your band or your tribe. That's what a vigil is, stay up all night. We can think of, in modernity, think of the hip-hop group NWA, right? Binding disenfranchised youths together in defiance. So you can think of NWA really spoke for a generation of marginalized blacks. What do we got here? This Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, Eazy-E. I forget the other guys. But yeah, friendship songs. So in addition to that, he also argues that music, so he argues these song types, but he also suggests that music is adaptive because it was a form of communication that, get this, evolved before our capacity for language. That is a contested hypothesis. He and other scientists suggest that music may have characterized the communication of Neanderthals, these beings here, which were an early form of human that were edged out of existence by modern humans about 100,000 years ago. It's thought that the Neanderthals use alterations in pitch and time, along with hand gestures, to communicate. And similarly, modern chimpanzees' communication is musical in character, and their vocalizations display variation in pitch and rhythm, going up and down, and with rhythmic gestures. That's not unlike music. So scientists believe that Neanderthals had a kind of musical language that resembled monkey calls, variation in pitch and timbre, to communicate things like danger, or there's food over here, or look out for that tiger. So it's not known exactly what it sounded like, but it's not believed that they had language anything like ours. But maybe they had something like chimpanzees, calls and shouts and growls and hand gestures that were musical in character, right? Had pitch and timbre. So scientists think that rudimentary vocalizations like grunts, shrieks, and groans evolved first, and that language came later. And that these grunts and shrieks and groans had a musical quality, like the calls and shouts of a chimpanzee. If that's true, it would mean that music came before language and was therefore critical to our survival. His thesis being that music served our ancestors by advertising cognitive and emotional and physical health, right? And that it was also an important form of communication that came before language. Interesting stuff. There's some overlap between the two mediums, music and language. One is that they are infinitely expandable, meaning that there is no such thing as the longest sentence. You can always add one more word, and there's no such thing as the longest melody, because you can just always add one more note. So they have that in common. They are infinitely expandable. They can go on and on forever. Okay, so this suggests that they are both infinitely expandable, that they are emanating from the same type of brain activity, meaning that there's an evolutionary link between the two. Fair enough. And then Levitin also mentions the music therapy argument, that music's adaptivity stems from its effect on our health. And today there's a whole field of study called music therapy that focuses on using music to help treat the sick, elderly, and mentally ill. And modern music therapy has many historical antecedents, from the ancient Greeks to Mesopotamia, the Middle Ages. And anthropologists speculate that people in pre-literate societies thought that music had special powers to affect the well-being and health of listeners. That certainly seems true, especially since when we study modern hunter-gatherers, there's usually a medicine man, and they use singing and chanting as part of their health rituals. This is pretty remarkable if you don't know this, but there are places on Earth in which there are still hunter-gatherers, people that live the same way that we lived 50,000 years ago. So if you go to deep into the Amazon, you'll find hunter-gatherer societies. And also in Papua New Guinea, right? You go to this center mountain range, There's just people that, they've never seen modern before. They just live in the forest as hunter-gatherers. Well, it turns out that both of these societies have medicine men, and both of these societies use music in a therapeutic way, suggesting that there is some sort of adaptivity inherent to music. Okay, conclusion. Due to the complexity of this issue, it seems unlikely that definitive answers will ever be found. And for what it's worth, I come down on the auditory cheesecake argument. I believe that communication, societal organization, everything that Levitin asserts, that would have evolved on Earth without music. And the fact that we can hear complex sounds and discern patterns and listen to music seems to be piggybacking off of these other abilities, right? Our ability to survive in a savage world filled with predators and lethal weather and bewildering uncertainty. It seems to me that singing songs and playing instruments was not really that necessary for our survival. Though it certainly does buttress our world and make life more interesting and beautiful, but we would still find mates and food if we had never heard of music before. That is my assertion. But I'm not a scientist. You should make up your own mind. What do you think? Okay, so here's some study questions. When is something adaptive? Something is adaptive when it confers upon us some survival ability. Like our big brains give us pattern recognition. Our upright walking posture gave us the use of our hands. The beak of the finch allows some to crack nuts and some to stab insects. Those are examples of adaptivity, right? The black moths in Industrial Revolution era England conferred a survival attribute. That's adaptivity. What is Pinker's auditory cheesecake argument? That music piggybacks off of our other mental faculties, like acute hearing and pattern recognition. Music just slips right in there, and it's pure pleasure technology, like pornography or art. What is Levitin's World in 6 Songs argument? That our ability to sing songs and to play musical instruments advertised our emotional, cognitive, and physical health to prospective mates. And that music was a precursor to language. And that is the significance of the evolution of language. So it's thought that we use shrieks and growls and pitch inflection and hand gestures to say things to one another like danger or coordinate hunting actions long before language proper evolved. And that these shrieks and growls had a musical component to them. Thus, music came before language and was therefore adaptive. What's your opinion on the matter? Have you ever thought about this? I know that it might be hard to live without music today, but would you be able to find a mate and have sex had you never heard a song before? I think you might be able to. Okay, I hope you got something from that.